Democrats, a lot of potential voters, then if it's a potential voter, they're usually a Democrat. Let me tell you something. So it's important for me to be in Bell County. It's important to come back to Bell County. I know people are working hard. I know Louis is running. Do we have anybody else who's running locally right now in this next election? Yeah. Okay, well, for those that are here, and I know it's always important, and Claudia was telling me she's running locally for several elections. So I always want to talk about that because to me, elections are won through the bottom up. And that's why it's important when you're running for statewide office, which I am, is to do several things, is to come out and talk to people on the ground, party chairs, precinct chairs, local people are running, and tell them why you're running and how you can help them. And I'm doing that right now. I've started out in New Braunfels this morning. A good group, a hardy group in Comal County, and believe me, they're surrounded. They're more surrounded than y'all sometimes. I think we feel that way. And then we went to Lockhart, talked to a very good group, and came here as our next stop, and then we're going to be in Lampasas before we go back. It was just and then yesterday celebrated LBJ's birthday in Hayes County. Everybody give him applause. A lot of good things that a president from Texas did. It's kind of hard to believe how far circled we've come on some of the issues. But my name is Sam Houston, and I'm asking for your support for Attorney General. And I'm not related to these Sam Houston. People always ask that. I wish I could say it. It'd be a lie. They'd look it up, you know. And I wouldn't say it. I never have. But it's my name, and it's a good name. It's an important name. A lot of people come to me and say, well, you got a great ballot name. How do you not win? Well, it's a little more complicated than that. But I actually do think that it is good to have a name that people remember, whether they read it in the press or in the local. But there's got to be some substance behind the name. You know, Gene Kelly ran for a lot of things. He didn't win a whole lot. Do you remember that? And so you really need substance, and that's what I want to do is talk to y'all about so that you can go talk to your neighbors, you can talk to your friends, send our stuff around, and tell people, you know, this guy's running. His name's Sam Houston, but he's serious. He's serious about this, and he ought to win. That's what I want to do.
No, it doesn't hurt that you can't.
I like that. Well, look. I've been a lawyer for 26 years, which is important. The Republicans are always knocking all these lawyers, but this is the job for a lawyer, the Attorney General, the lawyer for the state of Texas, so it's important. And my campaign's really theme is, because it's true, is that I want to put a lawyer and not a politician into the office of the Attorney General of Texas. We've had politicians too long. It's been too often used, and I think it's part of the product of the Republican domination of statewide politics, that power's grown in there and it's become the office of the Republican Party and not the office of the people of Texas. And that's why I'm running, and that's what I want to change. I have the background from 26, you can say a lot about me, and I'm not perfect, but few people will say I'm a bad lawyer because I'm a good lawyer. I've done a lot, I've tried many, I've done everything you're supposed to do. And I take my craft very seriously. And the way I take it seriously is not that you win or lose or do that, but that, you know, I've solved problems, solved disputes, looked at both sides of the issues for years. And that's what you need in the most powerful lawyer's office in the state. Perhaps the most powerful office in the state, when you think about it. The things that can be done, the good and the not so good that can be done out of that office are really awesome. And but
well, we're holding up Greg Abbott as an example, aren't we?
We are. But I want to get to that because I'm not running against Greg Abbott, but I will talk about what he's done and then the person I'm running. I've known Greg Abbott for a long time. I disagree with a lot of his policies. Wendy's doing a very good job running against him right now. And I'm not out to run against Greg Abbott, though I do want to change what he's done in the office. And I can tell you Ken Paxton, the person who's running to replace him, won't change more, and he's worse. Yeah. And that's the problem here. You know, here's the thing about that office. First of all, that office has been Republican-dominated so long that all the things that they can do, all the things that are important to everyday citizens, you and me, are not necessarily the feature. The feature seems to be, you know, the number one thing they talk about is suing the federal government. Greg Abbott's talked about as a campaign slogan. If you go see what Ken Paxton's talking about, it's not, I'm going to improve the child support division. It's that I'm going to continue to stop President Obama and this invasion, you know. I don't know, you know, what I always want to tell them is when we talk about it, I go, guys, you know, look, I disagree with you about everything, but let me tell you something. President Obama's only going to be the president for 2 more years. What are you going to talk about after that? What are you going to do then if your campaign slogan and everything you seem to beat on is fighting President? Well, in a year he'll be kind of a lame duck president. In 2 years he won't be. What are you going to do then? You know what? Because all it is it's rhetoric. It's wrong. I support the president. I have always supported the president. But you know, why are we talking about these things? And it's because what the Attorney General's office has done, or what Greg Abbott's done, what Ken Paxton's done, is they're putting politics over public policy, and it's just wrong, and we need to change it. And the big #1 thing is, and then this is what I've said, and people will always ask us, well, you're waving the white flag to Washington, which is kind of a silly thing. But here's what I said: look, we may or may not always agree with Washington D.C. That's okay. Louis in Congress, you know, there's a lot that you're talking about. You don't always agree. Governments don't always agree. I don't always agree with my family. But you know what? There's a better way to do things. You sit down with governments. Governments work together. That's what LBJ used to do. You know what? That's what they used to do, and it worked. What you didn't do is just run down to court and sue each other and spend taxpayer dollars and put it in the court system. And what I've always said is that we can disagree, but a lawsuit ought to be a last resort. And it dang sure shouldn't be a campaign slogan. So, and that's wrong. That's what Greg Abbott has done wrong, and that's what Ken Paxton has done that's wrong. But when you talk about public policy lawsuits, one thing that's happened in the Attorney General's office, and it's gone on and on and on, and it's the big public policy lawsuit where we're suing, literally the people of Texas are suing the people of Texas, and that's school finance reform. You know, look, where we come out on this, and we've talked about it, we've slashed and slashed and slashed public schools. Public schools are a path to the future. It's an investment in our children. It's the right thing to do to properly fund public schools. It's the smart thing to do, and you know what? It's required by the state constitution. And we've cut and cut and cut so that probably one of the richer states in the country falls at the very bottom in per pupil spending. Our teachers are paid way below the average. Is that what we want for the state? No. But you know what happens is the legislature, they don't want to, they pass the buck, so to speak. They put it in, they pass these unconstitutional budget plans, and then they say, okay, let the school district sue. And they sure did, 2/3 of them. Right now, and it's in court. And as long as the Attorney General's office allows that to continue and does things like Greg Abbott did, like you move to recuse the judge or strike the judge just to delay things, and delays and delays and delays, we're not going to get school finance reform. We're not going to get more funding. And there's a whole generation, you know, 2 or 3 years of kids who don't get it. You know, everybody says, we'll get it later. Well, what happens to the kids now as the classroom size grows up? What happens? Let's end that litigation. I can't solve it. I mean, I wish I could wave a magic wand and bring them up. You can't in the Attorney General's office. But a creative Attorney General can try to end that litigation and get it back in the legislature, where hopefully it's Wendy Davis and Leticia. Wendy can sign the bill. Leticia can push it through. We can get people back in there and do things that are proper. And then, look, if the legislature doesn't fund it, they can answer to you, and you, they can answer to the voters. Because it needs to be out of the court system. I want to do all those things. I want to redo the Consumer Protection Division of the Attorney General's office. I want us to have an environmental section that actually looks at it and tries to solve people's problems. I want our Open Records Division, which the newspapers are always important about, but I want that to be fair and equitable. I don't want there to be an opinion where chemicals are stored is kept away from the public, even though that's been allowed for years. I want to avoid that. I want to avoid any kind of impropriety. I want to run the day-to-day child support division so that people are treated fairly. Now, there may be numbers, and they pump up the numbers, but there's a lot more about child support and dealing with families than just numbers. And I want all those things to be focused on, and that's going to take a lawyer, not a politician, in that office. But most important, I want that office to be one where someone can be trusted. It is the office of the people of Texas. It is. I mean, there's 700 lawyers that work in there. They deal with our lives daily in different ways, whether it's representing the agencies. A lot of things we don't even know or realize because it's just things that do. So you got to trust. You know, always laugh. Everybody always laughs when I say this, but if you can't trust your lawyer, who are you going to trust? And so I don't know why people think that's funny, or they think that's a joke, but they do. It's like when I say I'm going to be brief. I'm a lawyer. They all burst out laughing. Look. You got to have somebody you can trust, and this is where we're at in politics today. And this is where you go talk to your. I I can guess that people that show up on the first day of school to the Democratic Party headquarters are usually going to be supporters, is a fair guess. But what I need you to do, and the reason you do this, is we got to get them all. It's going to take every bit of the effort. So I need you to talk for me, to talk to your friends. And here's the message that we bring out about this, about my race. You know, I'm supportive of Wendy and Leticia. They are doing, if they don't do well, I don't do well, and I don't win. But, you know, I got to do everything I can for my race, and some of the things I'm trying to do is pick at the edges, get the wave, get the roll. But people, listen to this message. Ken Paxton was a mistake for the Republican Party. They had Dan Branch, who was probably much more moderate, even though he didn't always sound that way, spent $6 million and couldn't beat Ken Paxton because he put a picture of himself with Ted Cruz up on his website, and all of a sudden, he's the thing. But the man has a history and a pattern of unethical behavior, and I'm not trying to I'm not slinging mud at people. I've got things, people can sling mud at me, but they won't be able to talk about my practice as a lawyer and what I've done. So I think it's fair to talk about someone when they've been a state rep and they haven't followed the ethical laws in disclosing businesses they've had that are doing business with the state. You know what, that's a big problem. If somebody who hadn't done it, oh, never mind, he caught me, never mind, now I'm going to disclose that. Serious issues that have been investigated again and again. It's been known about him. Then he came in, and then right before the primary came up, it turns out he violated the Securities Act. Now, without getting into great detail, here's what you tell people. We have a Securities Act in Texas that was voted on by Ken Paxton to basically police certain activity. We don't want Enrons, we don't want old people or elderly people cheated out of there, so we require certain disclosures. And to do one thing, and that is to solicit clients for a state security investor for money. And really, and there's a lot of other things, but basically the things that he's admitted to is a felony. He voted to make it a felony. So he then turned around and so it turns out to this. This is a man who voted on the Securities Act, voted to make certain actions a felony. He then committed those actions. He then now has admitted that he committed those actions to the Securities Board. All right? Now he says, but don't indict me, don't hold me consequence like everyone else is because it's just a mistake. Well, you didn't say it was a mistake when you made it a felony. Now there's been a criminal complaint filed with him with the Public Integrity Unit. I don't know what'll happen with it because you got somebody else who's got issues with the Public Integrity Unit right now. But you know what? Ken Paxton and Dan Branch said it. The Republicans said it. I'm not the only one said it. The man has admitted that he committed a felony as part of his being a lawyer. He's violated the ethical rules. That's not someone you can trust. That's the Attorney General. And I think people listen to that, even Republicans listen to that, and I think Dan Branch spent about $2 million telling them that. And so I think we have a very good opportunity to pick at the edges, get the message out, and really prevent what I think nobody wants, and that's someone getting into the Attorney General's office who you can't trust. And I'm doing everything I can to get that message out. But this comes to the last part. You know, I can't do it alone. And I mean this, everybody probably comes out here and tells you this, but it's important. You got to support your grassroots, local people on the ballot. Important. Anybody that's in this district, you got to support them. That's where it comes up. It ground swells up. I know that you're making phone calls and you're doing that. That's very important. If you're not doing that already, you know, I know Battleground Texas is working here and the party's working here because every vote we get is a Democratic vote, and a straight ticket vote's a vote for me, and I'm happy for that. For my personal election, if you could do this, take some information. We'll send out Facebook pages, tell your friends, go through those kind of things, and tell them, you know, there's a serious serious Democrat party. You know, that's not a faux pas. That's just getting about the fourth speech in the last couple. A serious Democrat who's been running, and this is a pragmatic, real lawyer versus someone who has a lot of problems. And this is one that people can vote for and support. Get that message out for me, and help me get that message out. Help me send those things out because we can win this. And here's the deal. I know this. You know, right now in Texas, we're in such a drought, literally and figuratively right now, as the Democrats, is that it's just been so long we haven't won that people just don't realize Democrats can win. And they just don't vote sometimes. If we can win one race statewide, if we can break that seal open, then it's going to change. Because you know what? It's out there for us. every potential vote out there is usually, I mean this, every potential vote, the people that don't vote are usually Democrats. The Republicans, they're done. They've reached their plateau. But we reach out to people and we get out our message, and we win because we're right. We're talking about the things that matter. They just have to listen and not think, you know, we're not going to vote for those Democrats. So keep working hard, do whatever you can, get out. We'll take some pictures, put them out on Facebook, put them on Twitter, put them on, give them to your grandchildren, whatever you do with your pictures. Let's get this out, and we can. This can be the year of the election that we can take statewide races back. Let's start it. I'd like to see every one of them. That would certainly be well. And, you know, we can do that. I can promise you we'd be doing well in the future. But, you know, I'm realistic, too, and I've got to focus, and I think Wendy ought to focus on hers, the TC ought to focus on hers, Mike Collier needs to focus on his, Steve Brown needs to focus on his race, John Cook needs to focus on his. I like our whole ticket, and we all get together sometimes, and we've done it, then we all go separate, and at the end, then we may all win. But I want at least one of us to win. I hope it's me. I hope it's one of us. That'll really be. I'll only be happy if it's all of us. But I really just want to try to start breaking forward, moving the ball forward, and let's get some sanity back in the state. It's crazy right now. The Republicans have lost. They've lost their perspective. Their primary prove it. Got to bring it back. All right. Thanks. I'll take some questions. Anybody has some? Please say some questions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We know that when there are very few jobs, there's more crime. When they're not quality jobs, there's more crime. And we're wondering if we had some statistics, where's the best place for us to go for the statistics in terms of, let's say, recidivism? And right now, there are 3 recent incidents nationally that have come to the forefront, and there's a call for action in terms of policing. And I don't know whether that touches your office, but I know a U.S. Attorney General stepped into a situation, right. And there are people who are calling for look at the statistics in terms of policing and militarizing certain things. I don't think we have that much of a problem in this area, but we don't know. We don't have the statistics really.
No, and I don't know where you would, actually, I could tell you where I thought you were going, and I'll say, because you said you're an educator, and one thing that I've thought about is that when we talk about crime and statistics and recidivism, I can tell you one investment we can make right now, and this is something I am trying to do as Attorney General, is we put more money in education. Look, if you start, there are statistics that directly correlate dropout rates with increasing crime rates. So, you know, look, anytime you're cutting back on public education, you better then go ahead and start putting some more money in prisons, because that's what's going to happen. Now, your question's a little different, and I'm not sure of, you know, unless it was a state issue, the Attorney General would be involved. This federal, you know, if it's somewhere else in another state, you don't. But I can tell you right now, one of the things that I've thought about clearly about crime and about is we got to get that public. We've got to increase our public education dollars. We have to educate this growing population, and it's a lot of different people coming in. And for people to say we shouldn't educate people that are here for whatever reason, that's bad thinking. That's short-term thinking, because it's going to get us in the long run. We've got to get people more educated.
That $5.4 million billion that was cut from education, I ran on my ticket as an educator. But what about tax reform? Because there's so many tax shelters that take money away from education. For instance, the mayor of Parker Heights, not that far from here, he had to step down because for 6 years he didn't pay his taxes. Right.
Look, I think the whole thing, I mean, look, this is kind of a legislative issue, because you talk about how you fund schools. I mean, really, you get in the lawsuit and you get it back in the legislature, and really the people that, it is so complicated to make your head spin about gold pennies and copper pennies and the way the money goes back. That needs to be simplified. Now, how, I'm not, you know, that's more of a legislative, and they talked about it, but I hear what you're saying, and because none of the school districts, the richer school districts and the less, you know, affluent school districts are happy right now. And it's the way the whole system's at, but the bottom line is, this thing needs to be back in the legislature. That's the bottom line.
Sam, question for you. What about all of the money that's being confiscated from all like the drug seizures and all that stuff? What happens to that money?
But it goes into different funds. There's
different agencies.
Yeah, that's just like, you know, whether the lottery money, the different money. You know who'd be a good person to ask about that is Mike Collier, who was here. Yeah, that's one of the things that we talked about. So I don't really know the answer to that exactly. Yeah.
Sam, I just have something to add to what they were saying is different. All these people sitting over there, most of them are volunteers that every week we block walk. We do voter drive here in Killeen. We are knocking on doors. We establishing neighborhood block captains. All of these people here have helped us out here in the Bell County Democratic Office. And we are knocking on doors, working for you and all our Democrats. Even Louis knocks on doors. Yes, we knock on doors, and we have some people drive, they get out, and they walk, and we are so proud of a lot of our volunteers.
That's
and
incredible.
we're working hard here. Just wanted you to know that.
Yes.
I have a question for you, and this is one that kind of speaks to, you say go out and rally support. One of the things I found to be really, really effective is when you can catch people emotionally where they live, get something that's relating to them. One of the things that's been a big issue I know in the state, it's kind of ebbed and flowed, is the issue of how the builders in the state kind of colluded. They've kind of forced binding arbitration on everybody. So now, you buy a house, you have a crummy lot, or you have a defect in your house, and you have no legal recourse. You've got to submit to that arbitration, which is then stocked with the building association's arbitrators. And you really kind of, again, another bit of unfairness. So if I talk to somebody who says, you know, I don't know, and I've heard it from a couple of people about those builders. So is there something that the Attorney General's office can do to kind of work that, make that better?
Well, you know, obviously you have certain legislation on the Residential Construction Act, and that's legal. You know, that's, again, when you talk about legislative functions, it's complicated. But here's where this is what I think is important. What I've talked about, why I think one of the reasons that the Attorney General's office needs to take a bigger role in consumer protection. And that is because we've been with the Republican Party for the past 10 or 15 years. It's all been all about tort reform, and you know they like suing. The public lawsuits seem to be real favor of them, but when someone sues when they're injured or when that's bad for them. So you know, because it's usually their donors who are getting sued. But with all of that, a lot of the rights have been restricted from consumers, whether it's in in the home construction area, just the general area of consumer protection. It's been restricted. So to me, the Attorney General needs to take a greater role in policing unscrupulous builders, because there's things that can be done from a public policy perspective to avoid that, even if the individuals had lost some of their rights. But the message to be sent on all these people is that this is what the Republican Party has been about: restricting individual rights in favor of their donors. It's just what we said. It's a culture of corruption. They've talked about it. Wendy's talked about it. It's because they've been in power too dang long. That's what you say to them. Not that they're evil, but when you've been in power too long, you start thinking you own it. It's not yours, because it's not us as a public. We are public servants. And they've forgotten it. And you can look at Rick Perry, whatever you want to say about it, you can look at his attitude. When they've been there too long, they think they're above reproach. They think they own it. And that's the message to say to all of them. And that's what you get. They limit and restrict individual rights to help their donors. And that's what's happened. Bob Perry was one of the biggest Republican donors ever. And, of course, you see a lot of these things happen. Yeah.
In the Attorney General's office, you know, I know the legislature makes laws and but what do you see the role of the AG's office in, like, environmental issues? Because, I mean, water obviously is going to be a big issue coming up for us, and there's fracking up in North Texas. What do you see kind of as your role? You know, I know that the legislature passes laws, but at some point there's going to be this fight over water.
Right. Well, again, I think there's going to be it depends kind of on the litigation and how things happen. And quite frankly, there are times, even if you're the Attorney General, you may be defending the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or an agency, even when you don't necessarily agree. That's the problem. The hard part of being the Attorney General is you are the lawyer for the state, and you have to take positions that you may not always personally agree with, but you have to do that. But I think there's going to be an expanded role both on the opinions that come out as far as how to handle certain things. Water rights is a huge issue. I mean, there was a big issue right the other day between the Lower Colorado River Authority and the Texas Water Commission. And there's a big fight right now between the rice farmers down at the lower end and upper end. It's going to be a growing fight. I think you're going to, and I can see there's going to be all kind of expanded areas for the Attorney General. How, I don't know exactly, because there may be litigation involved, there may be opinions that are written, there may be open records requests that have to deal with. or different ways as part of this whole policy. But I think the role is important, just again, the way you look at it, because again, the Attorney General is a public official in the state of Texas who advises all. So, yes, and answer your question, there's gonna be any and every way that that's gonna happen going forward, because we're gonna see both problems and basically, problems and goals that come out of all of these problems, the things that are happening. Yes, Louis?
Sam, currently right now, the state of Texas is being sued by the federal government for our voter ID laws. When you're elected, what will you do with that case? How would
You know, I don't know if it'll still, I mean, that's number one. I mean, again, that's one of those times I've thought about it, because I am against the voter. I think it's wrong when we passed the voter identification law. There was no evidence that that particular voter fraud was even existed, much less that this was something that was going to be, and it was ruled upon in the D.C. court before you had a case that came out that it was unconstitutional. You know, and you got to pick your battles. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to wait and see what happens with that, because I've already said that I would go out. It would be going out on a limb a little bit to try to end the school finance lawsuit. You know, that's because again, Greg Abbott says you're supposed to defend the state from all law. That's your job, like it or not. I don't want to necessarily go in and, you know, be bucking and turning around and becoming and not representing the state on everything that happens. I don't know that that would be a proper way to do it. I would try to resolve it. I can tell you that. I can promise you right now, you know, and I, quite frankly, I don't think I could throw up my hands and just say, I'm going to confess judgment. I just don't think you could do that. But I'd have a different philosophy about it, because I quite frankly think it is unconstitutional. I think there's big problems with the way our voter identification laws work. And I do think it's the same with the gerrymandering. You know, there's another lawsuit about I think that the problem has been is that Greg Abbott's just completely taken, he's never taken a role as if I'm going to think about all the people. It's what's good for the Republican Party. Voter ID is good for the Republican Party, so there's no any give, or he's not advising, hey, let's work to compromise. Same with the gerrymander. I mean, it was, and even putting a brief, you know, we weren't out to dilute minorities, we were out to elect Republicans. I mean, I was shocked that they said that. And so I would take a different role in the litigation. I would certainly try to resolve it. I'm not going to say I would confess judgment or anything, because I think that'd be very difficult to do. And the case may be over, but I mean, that's kind of gone way down the road before I would ever take office.
Yeah, and on a federal level, that's what you're going to have to do.
Well, you know, actually, there's a state level too. There's a state level. Yeah, they do need to, if they amended the Voting Rights Act and basically clever, you know, take care of the Shelby versus Alabama case, then that would have been solved. I mean, and it, you know, it's a sad thing, and it's a good question, Louis. I'm glad you asked it, but hard to answer. But I said this the other day, that the issue, it's sad to me that here we are in the state of Texas, where LBJ, who signed the Voting Rights Act, that we have a Republican Party who's just bound and determined to undermine it. It's just it's sad overall. Yes, Sandra.
Okay. Since you're going to be the Attorney General, I already decreed that. You are going to be. You're supposed to stand up for the Texas, so you would stand up for the Texas public schools, and can we put the kibosh on some of these charter schools, considering they've been statistically proven to be either not as good as even a public school?
Right. Well, you know what? That is more of that's a legislative function. I really don't know that would be the role of the Attorney General, because that's a whole.
Yeah, I know. It's
I'm not a
private
big
versus public
charter.
education.
Yeah, and I have my issues with that, but I don't know, as we sit here, Sandra, that I would have the jurisdiction or the authority to close certain schools. That'd be more of the education.
Well, you could also, could you stop the funding of the charter schools from the
that is a legislative function and a government's function. Yeah.
Who was your boss, and who would fire you if you did do something for the good of the people?
That
was against the state.
Well, you know, that's a good question. I guess I'm the Attorney General and the voters are the boss, but you can, you know, if you went too far, you could sure get impeached or indicted.
I have a question for you. What's going to be your first order of business when you're in office? What are the first things you're going to do? One of the
Well,
first things
you know,
you look
I
at.
was, yeah, that's a great question. Again, one of the first things I'd take a hard look at is the school finance and what can we start doing to put an end to that. You know, from a big policy perspective. Of course, the first thing you do is you figure out, it's been run by Republicans for 10 years, so you have to figure out who's gonna stay and who can support you. It's, you know, it'd be quite a monumental undertaking for that, an office that's been run by Republicans for that long to be switched over to a, you know, I call myself a pragmatic Democrat. They may say something else, but I'm pragmatic. And, but that would be a huge undertaking to keep the people who are there and who can support what your policies are. But one of the first things I'd take a hard look at is the school finance. Obviously, you'd have to deal with the voter ID. There's the ongoing litigation that's going to be happening, but that won't stop. But, you know, ensuring, you know, if you say from a policy perspective, that's what I'd have. Of course, the first thing would be making sure we have good lawyers that are going to stay and be in every different division, because you just have to take, you know, first thing you have to do is run your office. And that's what I have to do. Yes?
What's your opinion on Rosemary Lindbergh's actions and then Governor Perry's actions, and do you think it's gonna help the Democratic Party or hurt the party?
It's a lot of different questions.
Yeah.
3 questions.
You know, look, Rosemary Lindbergh's actions were, you know, no one's going to be able to support that, particularly the video. But, you know, I'll say everybody can change, and I would certainly leave that up to the voters and her about the way they handle that. I've never heard of her having other issues. I don't know if she's in rehab or moved on. So I'm not going to cast stones at somebody that's done something that's made a mistake, even though it was a terrible video that I think now is being used improperly against someone. And, you know, now with Governor Perry, you know, here's what I'd tell everybody. I'm not privy to all the information or know what's happened, you know, but I do know this. It was a Republican judge who appointed a Republican prosecutor who seems to be a no-nonsense guy, who took that evidence, investigated for a long time. Does not strike me as someone who'd want to just get someone indicted and then be made a ridicule, because they, you know, they're already going after him. He knew that when he got in it. A grand jury heard the evidence and they moved to indict him. That's our system. And you know, maybe you disagree with it, but I'm tired of them acting like this is just the most awful thing in the world. This is some Democrat plot, because it's not. These are Republicans. And if the evidence is there that he ought to be indicted and he doesn't get it quashed, then move forward. Now, politically, I've wondered, you know, here I've got an issue with Senator Paxton, and, you know, it took, probably politically, that took some of from all of us, that took away some of our message, because now you're hearing about Governor Perry and the people that are rallying for him just because they do every day, and whether he's being improperly, does he escape, instead of hearing about Wendy's message and so I don't know politically if that's a good thing. I want people to hear our message. I don't want them to, you know, vote against that. I think if they hear our message, I think we win. So politically, I guess the jury's out, so to speak, on what's going to happen with that.
Yeah. Apropos of that, can you define for everybody the relationship between the AG's office and the PIU? Is there, you know, is there any direct influence?
Well, no, the Public Integrity Unit is actually, that's one of the things that the Republicans have repeatedly wanted to put the Public Integrity Unit into the Attorney General's office. But the Travis County District Attorney's office is separate. That's like saying the federal government or the state government. That's a county government and a district attorney. Now, the Attorney General's office, it gets complicated. They can lend support to different criminal issues, and you can lend support, but it's really two different offices, and they've always run it different. And some people, you know, they've asked why was it there, and it's historical. But the Republicans have historically wanted to